Well, I am back again, and this time without a tinfoil hat on. No, today I wanted to put my truth-telling pants on and dazzle you with some unusual facts about the relationship between Aha, the Aeon of Elation, and Akivili, the Aeon of Trailblaze, because these two rascals have quite a few known interactions with each other throughout the Star Rail history, but on top of that, they also share an interesting connection to the imaginary tree. We are going to dive straight in, but before we do, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe if you want to see more of this type of content in the future. There's no good place to start when rattling off Aeon facts, so I'm going to start at the very beginning of time with the imaginary tree, a concept that sits at the heart of the Honkai universe. In Star Rail, it's a theory that explains the structure of the universe, where different worlds exist in a tree-like structure, with the crown of the tree absorbing imaginary energy, leaving it in a dynamic state, constantly growing and changing as worlds on the tree are born and destroyed. It's an idea that helps explain much of the multiverse-esque concepts that exist throughout the Honkai franchise. So what does a scientific theory have to do with the Aeons of Elation and Trailblaze? In Aha's case, the imaginary tree relates to the beginning of their journey, and in Akivili's case, it marked the intended end of their journey. The masked fools claim that Aha climbed to the very top of the imaginary tree, saw the void and machine-like stars, and how meaning bows before nothingness. They kept looking out until they saw a baby fall to the ground and cry, at which point they burst into laughter, which tore across the universe, and thus they ascended to Aeonhood. Akivili's databank entry on the Express states that Akivili left the isolated world of Pagana and continued to expand the unknown edges of the universe, trying to find an endpoint of the Tree of Existence. The Tree of Existence is another term for the imaginary tree, and the theory states that the end of the tree is dynamic and ever-changing. Yet according to the masked fools, Aha managed to find an endpoint to the tree at the time of their ascension. Then why would Akivili be in search of the unknown edge of the universe when Aha has apparently already found one? The obvious conclusion here is that the masked fools are unreliable narrators and that their parable is likely incorrect. But I don't think that that is a particularly fun reason, and honestly, the accuracy of the claims is irrelevant to this video, because what is important is that both of these Aeon stories have a reported connection to the imaginary tree, and I think that is very interesting, and I hope you do too. The next fact is going to be more important later in this video when we start talking about other simulated universe revelations, but I promise I left this one in here for a great segue at the end of the section. So, according to Herder's devlog 2 on the Elation in the simulated universe, Aha enjoyed meddling with the other Aeons, particularly Akivili. In fact, Aha once spent an entire year disguised as a human on the Astral Express. Then, when the opportunity struck, they blew up the Express alongside an entire planet. Which sounds incredibly cooked if you asked me. I mean, surely there were better ways to play a trick on someone you claim is a friend, but no, you chose to do something which resulted in the destruction of an entire planet. Seems on brand for the Aeon of Elation, I guess. That aside, Aha traveling alongside Akivili for a year seems like it may come up later in the story, particularly when those travels earned Aha the title of worst Nameless ever. So, let's take a little trip back to Penacony for a moment, and let's talk about the Nameless memory bubble. Sold by Dr. Edward at the Dreamscape sales store, this item is said to contain the dreams of the fallen Aeon Akivili. When you watch this dream bubble, it depicts a conversation between Pom-Pom and, allegedly, Akivili. Pom-Pom scolds Akivili for their ridiculous behavior across the galaxy, specifically accusing them of many food-related crimes, including the consumption of Pom-Pom's last serving of Express Special. When you finally offer an apology for being the worst Nameless in the universe, Pom-Pom denies your claim, stating that the title of worst Nameless belongs to the guy who blew up the train into 2 pieces. And we know that the person who did that was in fact the Aeon Aha. Now, there's a few interesting points of suspicion about this particular dream bubble. Firstly, the likelihood that this memory is actually Akivili's. Secondly, whether this memory could even be possible due to the fact that Akivili's disappearance happened prior to the establishment of Penacony. Both of these notes lead me to different conclusions. So even though I promised today was purely for truth-telling, allow me to pop my liar pants on for a moment to speculate on the truth behind this memory bubble. For starters, there is absolutely a case which could be made that the dream bubble is Akivili's, except we aren't the ones that are Akivili in the memory. It's Pom Pom. Part of the logic here comes down to Pom Pom's behaviour when presented with the memory bubble. They hurriedly jump at the memory and clamour to get closer to it. We assume Pom Pom wants it because they missed the former members of the Astral Express. But what if it's because they recognise it as their own memories? It would make sense when they follow up by saying that many things have happened on this train aren't within your knowledge. I'll tell you about them when the time is right. My other piece of evidence, which is said with big air quotes, is Pom Pom's comments about the Express special. This entire exchange ends with Pom Pom saying, with great dismay, "Express special, my favourite Express special. When will that guy give it back to me?" But in the dream bubble memory, Akivili confesses to consuming the last serving of Express Special. But Pom Pom knows that Akivili is gone. So then why do they seem convinced that someone is going to give it back to them? I know that you can always just make more food, right? So why is this special so, well, special? I mean, it's food that has supposedly already been eaten, so why is Pom Pom waiting to get it back? Something about it just doesn't add up, which is potentially a better argument for the case that could be made to suggest that Aha was somehow involved in planting this memory bubble. I have one key piece of wording here to go off, and that is the fact that after Pom Pom's accusations, we get given a dialogue option, one of which specifically says, "This Trailblaze expedition of yours is indeed an elating one. If you pick this option, Dr. Edwards says, perhaps it is, but I won't make any explanatory or leading comments on the content of this dream bubble." But if you pick the option asking what this dream bubble has to do with Akivili, Dr. Edwards responds by saying, "Let me reiterate that I won't make any explanatory or leading comments on the content of this dream bubble." Why not use this language for both options? Why make a somewhat leading comment suggesting that there could be validity to it when you explicitly say you won't make leading comments? So I can definitely see a world in which Aha had something to do with this, but I just don't really know how or why. Well, that feels like enough on that one topic. For now, Pom Pom will just have to keep their secrets. Alright, the truth-telling hat is back on, so let's start digging into some more of the simulated universe lore drops, starting with the Swarm Disaster simulated universe secret called Gondola, Helping Gods, also known as the Gondola Incident. In that simulated universe expansion, we traverse the gameplay as Akivili, and so the writing being shown comes from their perspective. And at one point in history, the Nameless were on a journey below the decks of a morning actor gondola, but Aha urged his masked fools to go forth and steal it, despite the fact that you checked to make sure you were protected from Aha's lies. The key wording for me in all of this are lies and the thrill of being deceived, or in other words, the idea that Elation isn't quite what we think it is. Ashokai did a brilliant video on this subject, which I would highly recommend you check out. But for now, I think there is something to be said of the joy that Aha finds at others' expense. And by others, we often mean the Trailblaze. So yeah, Aha got the masked fools to steal a morning actor's gondola with a bunch of Trailblazers on it. Because of course they did. Speaking of revelations from the simulated universe, beyond just the Gondola Incident secret, the Communing Trail chapters of the Swarm Disaster expansion provide some interesting perspective on how Aha interacted with Akivili. To grossly oversimplify the main information from Swarm Disaster, Tazaronth the Propagation had the ability to self-replicate, which led to the rise of the Swarm throughout the universe. To stop their devastation, a group of Aeons worked together to bring them down. The Aeons in question were Clipoth, who... That's how I choose to say Ho. I don't know how to say the Equilibrium's name. I apologize everyone in advance. Shipe, Aha, and Akivili. As we now know, of course, Clipoth's hammer didn't kill Tazaronth completely, as their path lives on, with their corpse currently imprisoned in amber, with Lorcha in possession of a fragment of said divine corpse in that mysterious coffin of his. Prior to this discovery, Herder also made comment that Tazaronth would resurface sometime in the future. The reason I mention all of this is because the dialogue presented in the Elation Communion 1. Simulated Aha speaks directly to the Trailblazer. Aren't you going to join the fun, fake Akivili? Don't you want to listen to my ideas about the Astral Express and Tazaronth? First up, they know that we aren't Akivili, something the other simulations do not seem aware of. And they want to tangle themselves in the mess that is the Propagation's corpse and its ties to the Express. Interestingly, after Aha addresses us, Screwlum stops the simulation due to the fact that Tazaronth has threatened Trailblaze. Herder's reaction to this is disappointment, as it meant she couldn't find out if Aha had blown up the Express around this time. All of this content was released way back in 1.3, and I must admit, it all feels like a lovely bit of foreshadowing given everything we know now, especially given how much Aha loved sticking their nose in it. Before we move on to my final topic, which may have a sneaky bit of theorizing involved, I wanted to briefly make mention of one last piece of writing in the Swarm Disaster simulated universe. The first Tazaronth secret reads as follows. Don't forget, you're playing as Akivili. Turning into a mortal and hiding in the crowd is what you do best. Don't worry. Just close your eyes, relax your limbs, and you will find your senses in the middle of a gallery of a plethora of colours. We do not know if Akivili has truly fallen, and here we have a very clear reminder that turning into a mortal and hiding in the crowd is what you do best. It's more potential fuel to the fire that wages in the Trailblazer is Akivili believers. Now, I'm more partial to an even sillier theory that we, the player, are actually Akivili, but that is based on nothing but deeply unfounded intuition. But what I do think this fact is a good reminder of is that Akivili, like Aha, are the closest Aeons to humanity, who possess the ability to disguise themselves amongst us, which leads me to my very last point. I think Aha gave Nanook their scars. Now, in my last video, I made the suggestion that the improv tour trailer about Nihilux's fan art may instead be Aeonic truth. So to catch my full theory on that, make sure to check out that video. So with that in mind, let's assume that the events depicted within that trailer were accurate, which would mean that Aha stabbed Nanook at some point, which left them permanently wounded. I mean, they used that art for the thumbnail of the video, so there's gotta be some significance to that other than just clickbait, surely. But to understand the next part of my logic, we need to take our attention back to a readable that has been in the game since 1.0 on Herder's space station. It's called Recording. A Fool's Play. Calamity's Wrath seeks olden clash. Fool's Blade rends divine flesh. To summarize, it's a transcription of a recording of the Fool's Play, told by a Xianzhao storyteller, which also features some interjections from a mildly engaged audience. The story describes how Nanook went back to their homeworld to demand an answer from their past, but unfortunately, they were met with a nameless fool guarding the portal. Wielding a rapier with an extraordinary power, the fool dodged most skillfully like a slippery fish in a pond or a flash of a falling star. The Ruin author did battle with the fool for 7 days and 7 nights, and eventually Golden Ichor seeped out of their divine body. This is the origin of that unhealed wound. So according to this story, a fool reportedly left Nanook with his scars. The text goes on to say that people seek out the golden ichor left from the wound to create mead, which can be found at the rumoured Fool's Tavern. Now, a few drink names pop up here, and now that we've visited the World's End Tavern for ourselves, we actually have a menu of the drinks available, and none of them match the names mentioned here. And yes, there are a lot of very logical reasons as to why this could be the case, but I want to offer one of my trademark, classic, silly suggestions and say that I think Aha was impersonating the Xianzhao storyteller to tell this story, and cannot correctly say what drinks flow at the tavern of masked fools because they're banned. Now, I know my reasoning here is loose, but I think it could be just strong enough to hold a little bit of merit. Plus, I just really wanted to mention the Fool's Play readable that has been sitting around since 1.0, even though it doesn't directly relate to the relationship between Aha and Akivili. So, look, if you interpret this differently and think it has some other meaning that I've missed, let me know in the comments. Well, that is everything I dug up for you for this video. Hopefully you enjoyed finding out a little bit more about some of the interesting connections between Aha and Akivili, who feel more like best frenemies than actual friends, but that feels about right for two gods, to be fair. If you found this video elating, then don't forget to like and subscribe, or if I've missed any spicy Aha info because they are a slippery Aeon, I'd love to hear them. And of course, with 4.1 and a new Divergent Universe in sight, I am definitely keen to dive into whatever secrets lay in wait within the Arcadian Chronicles, so please keep an eye out for that at some point in the near future, as well as any juicy findings that come with the new patch. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I will catch you for my next ridiculous rambling video.